Sir, Article 14 of the Constitution guarantees you equality of opportunity. It disallows any kind of discrimination on the basis of place of birth, sex, religion, etc. Why should this alone happen that when it comes to the question of recruiting men to the army or the armed forces, you should think of the volume of population, the number of recruitable male population in a state, and then base your recruitment to a particular regiment on the basis of these figures. So, I would plead that the whole matter be reconsidered. Otherwise, what would happen is that on these two counts alone, the disparity in pensions, the reduction in the recruitment quota to the various regiments of the armed forces, the resentment against these policies and these procedures would continue to go on, and on one day this can burst in such a big dimension that it will not be controllable. I would also plead for some other benefits to the ex servicemen. For example, you have reserved 10% of posts or 15% posts in the various public sector undertaking in the departments of government of India in the state governments for persons retired from armed forces. But have you ensured that the system is working well? Where is the monitoring system? Is there any monitoring system in this country under the control of the Ministry of Defense, or let us say tagged on the Directorate of Resettlement and Rehabilitation, which ensures that whatever percentage was fixed for every state, for every department, for every public undertaking has been implemented, and the people who served in the prime of their life in the armed forces of their country, who gave their sweat and toil, sometimes their blood also, are not driven from pillar to post just at the suggestions of a few clerks and petty officials. They are the heroes of the armed forces, but they have to suffer the insults and injuries, and they have to suffer the irritants which you can not imagine. Here, all members of parliament, including the members Minister of Defense, will award laurels to the armed forces. But when a man retires from the armed forces, he is driven from pillar to post. He is a man who has done his duty. He is the man who has dedicated the best years of his life to the cause of the nation. I would like to talk about the small benefits like setting up of CSD canteens. They should be ensured about them. There are large chunks of areas where they cannot find the necessities of life. Every suggestion that is made by the member of parliament here or made by any persons in the public life is scoffed at by bureaucrats because it has emanated from the representative of the public, because it has not come from the files of petty clerks. Therefore, I would plead that there should be system in which you not only look to the people serving in the armed forces, but you should look to the areas they are serving and there should be development. If a person dies in the armed forces, his wife or mother in the village should be able to receive telegram or telephone call. Therefore, I plead for the development of the areas from which these large number of servicemen are recruited. I would suggest that unless plans of the Ministry of Defense are linked to the total defense of the country by simply parading the armed forces, by giving them laurels and medals, you will not be able to defend the country. Your lines of strategic movement, the important railway lines of defense, must be properly restructured so that you can mobilize armed forces in the manner which meets the enemy threat immediately. Every general or major general knows that the line of defense must be perpendicular to the border with the enemy country. There is a railway line to Amritsar. The Ministry of Railways and the state government of Himachal Pradesh and Punjab have proposed that alternate line of defense must be constructed. This should be given due priority not only for the development of the region but also for the development of the country. You cannot move forces in the areas. We must also look the navy because it is often a neglected wing of the armed forces. We forget this wing. We have a long coastal line. We should see that it is properly guarded. Now that the Indian Ocean is going to become the seat of gunpowder with the US design looming dark in the horizon, we must not risk. We should be alive to the threat not only from the across the borders but also from the coastal side. I would very much like that the Indian proposal to treat the Indian Ocean as a zone of peace should be accepted by all nations of the world. I would like to conclude by saying that our armed forces are doing well. Stop.